Welcome to the Life Begins at Midlife podcast, where we pop the champagne to celebrate the unexplored joys and endless adventures that await us in the midlife. Flipping the script on what it means to hit those fabulous 40s, 50s and beyond. Because here, we don't believe in midlife crises, only midlife revolutions. Reminding you that the only thing we're letting go of at midlife is the notion that it's all downhill from here. Nope, we're here to climb higher, dream bigger, and laugh louder. Each week, we'll dive into the myths, share the truths, and unlock the secrets to making the midlife years your best years yet. From rediscovering lost passions to embarking on new adventures, we're covering it all. Expect candid conversations with inspiring guests who've turned their midlife years into their most dynamic chapter yet. We're talking to everyone from entrepreneurs who've launched successful startups from their kitchen tables to adventurers who decided age is just a number when it comes to climbing mountains or sailing the seas. So if you've ever found yourself pondering, is this all there is? Or you're just eager to embrace the richness of midlife with both arms wide open, then you, my friend, are in the right place. Grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's show the world that life doesn't just begin at 20, it begins again at midlife. And remember, in the Life Begins at Midlife podcast, the only rule is to live confidently, love unconditionally, and laugh uncontrollably. Let's get started. So hello and welcome to today's episode of Life Begins at Midlife. We have got J Winslow in the studio today, and I'd like you to give her a warm welcome. And welcome, Jay. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So, Jay, tell us a little bit about yourself and, your journey into midlife.
Well, my journey as a child started off kind of rough because I had a very challenging childhood with myself. I was a very depressed teen, and I was actually quite suicidal as a teenager. And my entire world and focus was on how do I get the heck out of my house and out into the world where I know life will be better, which was interesting because, of course, life is always challenging as we grow older. We just sort of, I think, manage it differently. And I learned how to eventually, thank goodness for personal development and personal growth, I got introduced to information and strategies that were really life-altering for me, that shifted me and continue to shift me many, many, many decades later into a space of like enjoying life and seeing the gifts and the joy and the fun. Yeah. So I embrace midlife very differently.
Awesome. So I think we've all got different, journeys that have brought us to this point. But I think we both agree that, this is an amazing season in our lives where we can, sort of be allowed to be who we are and without needing anybody else's permission.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Like you and I were just talking before the recording about our culture. And one of the really odd things about culture is we spend so much of our younger years attempting to fit in when I believe we are all born to stand out. Right. So, and then we reach this sort of moment, this pinnacle where we have to choose. Are we going to continue down that weird road of trying to fit in to some thought or some idea of what we're supposed to be? Or are we going to forge our own path and just do us? And the cool thing about this part of the journey is that many of us by this time of life have said, nah, screw it. I'm just going to do me. And especially I notice I don't have children, but I think if we have children, it's one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids is to model, because they're still in that conflict of fitting in, but to model what it's like to do ourselves, be authentic, share our own gifts so that we give our kids permission to do that too. And that's a lot of the work I do with leaders and businesses is how do we become aware of what makes us unique and then really lean into that to amplify our message in the world. It's fun.
Well, that's it. Because if we're all the same, it's life becomes
Boring.
absolutely, and it's nice
Yeah.
to be able to bring our own unique flavor into it, because we've all been through our own unique experiences in life that have made us who we are. So why are we all trying to be the same? Because
It's a fascinating conundrum, isn't it? I know. It's so odd, but it's so human. And it's funny because if you look at other species, right, like they don't really agonize over this. I love, when people talk about a flower doesn't worry about blooming, they're here to shine. They're here to share their beauty. They're here, and they don't really focus on if the flower next door is getting their light, right? They're just moving into the next stage of development, which is being their best blooming self. Like, why aren't we doing that? So I love that space of midlife, where for me it's been such a process that started when I was 28, but now that I'm of a certain age, I really value that I never figured it out. I never figured out how to fit in. And it was so painful. But I remember the moment, I actually wrote about it in a book, where I had this oh my gosh, this is what I went through all of that for, because I was hired by companies to teach them how to be different. After agonizing about being different my whole life, I'm being hired for this. This is gosh, life is weird.
it is, because if you think about it, it's caused you so much pain and anguish to think that you were different, a square peg in a round hole, so to speak. And now you're being paid and rewarded for being that square peg in a round hole. It's actually quite.
Yeah. And it just shows you these weird dichotomies of life that we are meaning, right? We know that humans are meaning making machines, and what we make meaning out of that later serves us so well is just if you can impart that to a child, but you can't because they're in so much emotional distress. That how can you even say, oh, well, don't worry, this is going to be turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. You're like, are you on drugs? That's crazy. You're crazy,
someone
lady.
had told you when you were suicidal and in a very unhappy place as a youngster that this would be the best thing that could ever happen to you. You probably would have told them to go and,
Yes.
take on come back.
Right. You would say, hey, you don't understand, right? The typical, you don't understand. Well, no, I don't understand. You're the only one. And that's the other part that I think we rob humanity of, is that we are the only ones that can make ourselves enjoy this journey. So when we are being tortured, whether it's emotional or physical, or you have if you live in a household that has a lot of discord, as I did, then you think, oh my gosh, it's going to be like this forever and ever. I'm never going to fit in. I'm never this. I'm never that. This will never ever, right? It's so absolute. And we don't teach our kids that happiness is a skill. This is what I speak about. Happiness is a skill. It's a practice. It's the whole thing about you don't just take one bath and you're clean forever. You have to practice being happy. You have to practice accessing joy. It's self-generated, I mean, now I can find joy in pretty much anything, or at least make me laugh about it. Where before I would just go spiraling into darkness about the doom of humanity and how it was over. It's all over. But it doesn't feel that way anymore because I've learned, and I have tools, and I have skills, and I have I have practices to lean on. Why don't we teach our kids this? I mean, maybe people are, but I haven't met them yet. Why aren't we teaching this in school? Why aren't we teaching this in kindergarten?
Yeah, I think the whole school system, that's probably another conversation for a completely different day, but I think there's a whole lot there that could definitely be revamped and more and modernized a lot more than what they have been doing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so thankful that we are finally starting to really value emotional intelligence and what culture is calling soft skills, which are more like essential skills for life. Hello. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we are moving in that direction, and
If you've
I'm
got
grateful
those skills, then you can learn all the other skills on top of that. But I think if you don't have the fundamentals in place, everything else is a lot harder.
Yes, these are foundational. So thank you for sharing these messages of sort of hope and light, because it's so important.
Absolutely. And if we all do our little bit, then that ripple effect will then keep moving out to as many people as we can.
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier before we came onto the recording that you were part of a book that's being released. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
I would love to. Thank you for that invitation. Yes, I am part of a book. It's a compilation book. So I wrote a chapter with 20 something other authors, and it's a fascinating book. I had no idea when I was invited in that it would be so cool. I've done a few other books, and they have also been bestsellers, which is pretty neat. But this book is particularly about this stage of life. It's called Third Act Encore, and it's written by people who are in their if we take our lifespan, which is now for many people around 100, and we divide it into quarters, and I am in my third quarter. So it's my third act. The person who created it has a theater background, hence the third act reference. And many of the people in the book are actors and musicians and friends of hers that have done all sorts of fun, artsy things. And I was sharing earlier that one of the cool stories, I am on the launch team, so I was able to read prior to its release a lot of the stories, and they're really interesting because many of these people came up at a time when, some of the people who will be reading this are not even aware of this, right? So some people grew up around the time of World War II, or they're very present with their families. So Pat, who spearheaded this project, is Filipino and Hawaiian. So she has a very particular story that reflects her heritage and that time. I read a story by a guy who is in the band Santana. I'm a big Santana fan from back in the day, and his story is amazing. The guy who wrote, he's a singer, and he did a story right before mine, wrote about his depression and suicidal tendencies. And he's this magnificent singer and his journey. And I wrote about one of my aha moments at Burning Man, of all things. I'm a burner. And it's a super fun moment where I realized, oh my gosh, I'm getting old. Like, when did this happen to me? Because I don't feel old. And it's so funny that as you get older and you start to see older than you people, and you realize that trapped inside that old body, behind that older facade, is like this 20-year-old, 12-year-old person. Like, we don't change inside so much. Our body, our shell starts to disintegrate, if you will. But like who we are, and I'm still a little kid inside. I'm kind of a little kid outside too, but that's a different story. But yeah, so our book is launching in May, and we're having this really cool event in New York City because she's in the theater. She's created this whole Broadway show, and the other interesting part about it is that she, in her own journey, has seen the need for mental health assistance, not just with older people, but also in our world. And we were talking about how, I call it AC, after COVID, we are all living in this sort of traumatized state that is not being really addressed in the world so well. So part of this, our funds will go to this mental health foundation that she's created, which is pretty cool. So I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to reading when it is released.
Yes, it's called Third Act Encore. So
lovely. Sounds amazing. And
it's going to be fun.
With a lot of interesting stories. And I love reading all those different journeys that people have been through, and how they've turned something that often is seen to be a negative, and they've turned it around and seen that silver lining, that positive side to it, which quite often people just, as you mentioned earlier on, think that that's their lot and that's how they're going to have to live throughout their entire life. But we do have a choice that we can say, right, that's happened to us, but how are we going to live going forward? And like you said, choose happiness, choose joy, get the help, get the support, surround yourself with people that make you feel happier and better. And then that then ripples out. And
right. And there's so many of us that feel like we're misfits. Like, we think we're alone, but we're living in a world of misfits. Like, we're all a misfit on some level. And that was the other cool thing about the book, is that everyone, and the other cool thing about the book is it's designed as more of a coffee table book. So it has all these cool black and white and color photos of people, going through their lives, and they're very period, and it's very cool. But we don't realize, and that's why I think it's such an important book, we don't realize the impact that our youth has on our development, and that we're not alone, as you're saying, that we all go through some sort of trauma. And some of it is big T trauma, and some of it is little t trauma. My trauma could be described as nothing compared to what other people have been through, but it was life altering, and it was all I knew, being immersed in that. And I couldn't even really take it apart until I was older, right? Because when you're in any kind of difficulty, you're just trying to get through it and survive. But turning that into an asset and turning that into part of the reason that you are able to thrive later on is that, as you mentioned, foundation that is being chiseled out of this hardness, out of this stone, that we don't realize that we are sculpting something beautiful when we're chipping away at that. We don't realize it. It's very important.
That's amazing how you've just said that. I can just feel that, and in the words that you've just said, how powerful that is, if you look at it from that point of view.
Yeah. So I'm really hoping that not just older people read this, but that younger people really get the value, because I think for all of us in the book that have gone through difficulties, that's what we really want to share, is that on the other side is so much light and beauty. And I know, when I speak, it's like when I speak to friends who are going through a tough time, whether it's a divorce or a death or they lost their job, right? Loss. And I know I've shared with so many of them because I've been through it. Like, on the other side, I promise you, is so much, there's so much joy, and there's such a richness in life for you to step into. But when we're in it, we can't find our way there, right? We're just in the swirl. That's what I call it, the swirl.
It's like being caught in this big, gigantic storm, hurricane, cyclone, whatever it is, with the thunder, lightning, wind and rain and everything going at us. Yeah. And then knowing that when that all just calms down, you can have probably the beautiful clear skies, the lovely rainbows, the sun, the birds, and everything coming out again. Yeah. And it's knowing that once you've been through that.
It's really hard to share. I mean, even now when you go through that, right, it's so difficult to say that not only is there beauty on the other side, but who you are becoming as a result of this difficulty is this new version of you is going to be incredible.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the trust factor of saying, right, going through all this, I know there's something better. If I just keep going, with so many people just put the brakes on and say, well, I'm staying here. And then they end up with that nasty, horrible situation. And it just continues. Hey.
Yeah. Or even if the situation goes away, our state of mind stays the same, because we've lost, like you said, we've lost trust, we've lost faith, we've lost our way. So how do we find our way back? And I believe that we don't do it on our own. Like, for me, when I went to my first personal development class and I started to realize, and the lens started to open, and I've been on that journey for over 30 years. Like this, it's not a one and done. It's a process, but it's the most beautiful process I've been through.
Absolutely. And it's worth all those moments where you think, gosh, this is so hard. This is so difficult. Is there ever going to be anything better on the other end? And the more we do it, the more we realize that we're going through something, you work through that, and things do get better and the momentum builds.
Yeah, it's a muscle, right? We have to use it. It's like I went to the gym the other day. So I had like most ancient humans, I got a new hip about 1.5 years ago. And for the last year, I've been going to the gym, which I hadn't because I was not able to do much. And I hadn't been going to the gym for ages because I live at the beach. I ride my bike. I go for a walk. Like, who wants to go to a gym? But I've been very intentionally getting stronger. And so the other day I was at the gym and I haven't been doing like sit-up kind of things. And you can tell my belly is growing. And I started doing sit-ups. And the next day I could not get out of bed because my tummy hurt so much.
Because you've not been those muscles. So it's the same thing with everything else. Hey?
Yeah.
Happiness muscle as well. If you don't use it, the joy muscle, you forget how to them. And
and like we were saying also, AC, our worlds got real small, and we all have to remember and start practicing going out again. Like, what's that like? What's it like to have a life after we were all in lockdowns, after the world came to a grinding halt and all this fear was instilled in us? Like, now what do we do? It's an interesting process, this life thing.
It is. And it's something that none of us have been through before. So we can't even cast our memories back and say, well, when this and this happened, we did it this way, that worked and that didn't work. It's a completely new canvas for us all to navigate. And some of us are getting it right. Some of us are getting it wrong. And
and we all have I call it your recipe for success. Like, we all have our own unique recipe for success. And I think that's the journey. Like, our whole journey is about uncovering our recipe. And if you're really, really, really lucky, you do that early. But most of us don't. And the recipe changes. Like, maybe you used to like cinnamon in your recipe and now not so much, or maybe you have an allergy to it. So we're always adjusting and we always are changing, and we have to not only let it happen, but embrace the new season. And that's why
see it as an adventure. It's not about getting to the destination. It's the process of, what do you uncover as you're going there, getting there.
Great point.
You can change, I don't really want to go that way. I'm going to go and do a bit of a detour and go and see what's happening around there. And
yes. It reminds me of that. When you said that, what popped in my head was, that social media, it's a graphic and there's two people on a bus and one of them is staring out the window at like a wall of a stone, like a mountain, and thinking like, oh, this is boring. And the other person is staring out the window and it's like hills and valleys and giraffes and like fun. And they're like, woohoo, this is cool. Like, absolutely. We have to
on the same bus going the same direction.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, which window are you going to look out of? Yeah. 100%. We get to choose. Yeah.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it for today. It's like, what are you going to choose? For all the listeners out there, it's giving you some food for thought. It's like, are we choosing happiness or are we choosing to focus on the doom and gloom? I know what I'm choosing. I know what Jay's choosing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Try to love the journey, man, because that's all you get.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jay. Lovely having you today. And we'll speak again soon.
Thanks so much.
As we wrap up another episode here at Life Begins at Midlife, we want to take a moment to extend a heartfelt thank you to our sponsor, Jackie Bourne from Purpose Unleashed. Jackie's commitment to empowering individuals on their journey of self-discovery and transformation truly aligns with the spirit of our show. Whether you're navigating the challenges of midlife, seeking clarity on your next steps, or simply looking to live a more fulfilled life, Purpose Unleashed offers the guidance, tools, and support you need to turn your aspirations into reality. For those of you feeling stuck or at a crossroads, remember, it's never too late to redefine your path and embrace the life you've always dreamed of. Visit Purpose Unleashed website to discover how you can start your transformative journey today. Let Jackie be your guide to a more vibrant, purpose-driven life. You can find this link to the website in the show notes below. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and sharing your time with us. Remember, every day is a new opportunity to grow, to love, and to make a difference. Until next time, keep striving, keep dreaming, and keep listening.